Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us for our webinar today as we host special guest Rebecca Lammers, Chair of the Taxation Task Force at Democrats Abroad. We'll be discussing what's being done for Democrats abroad there, how that impacts our lives as expats, and other interesting topics as well. With me today is my colleague Joshua Madden, a financial planner at Dunhill Financial. So before we get started, just a quick disclaimer. The information presented here today is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Be sure to first consult with a qualified financial advisor and or tax professional before implementing any strategies discussed herein. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Josh and Rebecca.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks for taking the time, Rebecca. It's been a while since we caught up, but we thought it'd be a great thing to do is just have kind of a conversation to introduce people who may or may not be aware about the work you guys are doing for Democrats abroad in the UK and with the taxation task force. So I guess really we can just go ahead and start there and say, well, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization and all the work you're doing.
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for having me. Really appreciate talking with you guys and helping to spread the word about the work that we're doing. So yeah, so I mean, a little bit about myself. I have been living in London for the last 18 years. I moved here originally to do my master's, and then I got a job, and then I met my British husband. So I kind of tick all of the boxes on the reasons that most people move abroad. It is usually for work, education, or love.
Is
So
that like they have a bingo card for that? I don't know.
yeah,
You have a row.
but that's basically what keeps me here. And I got involved in Democrats Abroad in 2017. After Trump got elected the first time. Not for great reasons, but I didn't have a political background or anything. I just didn't understand what was going on, and I wanted to get involved. So I started volunteering for the Taxation Task Force, which is the group of volunteers who are all over the world, who are working together in order to fix the tax problems and financial access issues that Americans abroad face. So I took over the team in 2022. So I've been steering the group for over 3 years now. And we're all volunteers, including myself, and we work very hard and we're very dedicated in order to try to address and fix some of the problems. And we've made some really big strides last year, and also hopefully, fingers crossed, this year as well. So I don't have a crystal ball. I can't predict the future, but I can at least try to share as much as I know about what's going on in Washington and the kind of work that we've been doing in terms of trying to change the tax laws. So yeah, hopefully that gives you a good overview.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think those of us who are on the call and who work with us, or at least in that space, we're all well aware of what you're talking about, right, Rebecca, with the whole citizenship-based taxation and all of the fun little problems that people can encounter as a result. I think that's one of the projects that you would be able to shed some light on what you guys are doing, because there are some pushes about what's called residence-based taxation. I don't know if that's something you wanted to just talk a little bit about to just let people know what that all is and what it means for them and what's going on and in the States about that at this point in time.
Yeah, so it might help to kind of take a little bit of a step back and kind of look at this from the 30,000-foot view. Basically, this year there are a number of provisions that are expiring in the tax code, and so this is a particularly big year for tax because Congress has to pass a tax bill by December 31st. Now, even though the election in November last year didn't necessarily shake out the way that I would have liked it, we are where we are, and there is a Republican trifecta, so that means that the Republicans hold the White House, the Senate, and the House. And so they're the ones that are steering the agenda in terms of what may or may not go into a big tax bill for this year.
Mhm.
That said, there have been a number of provisions that touch and would impact on Americans abroad. The big one that most people ask about is the one about residence-based tax. So at the end of last year, there was a bill that was introduced by Congressman Darren LaHood, who is from Illinois. He's a Republican who is on the Ways and Means Committee in the House, which is the tax writing committee.
Mhm.
And it basically was a bill that introduced an idea of if you are an American abroad, you would have the choice to opt opt in. So it's an opt-in, it's not a automatic blanket kind of thing. You would have the choice to opt in to this residence-based tax treatment, as it were. And essentially, what would happen is you would no longer have to file a US tax return on an annual basis if you only have non-US sourced income, and you would only be subject to tax on your US sourced income. And so, depending on your personal circumstances, if this bill were to pass as it was introduced in December, you would be taxed in a different way. But I think the main driver for that particular bill is that the people who are US citizens living outside the US and have most of their income that is sourced from within the country that they live in. So like they have a local job, they get paid in local currency, they have
Mhm.
a pension or a retirement account in their country of residence, their whole financial life is outside of the United States. Their only connection to the US is that they are a US citizen. And so this procedure essentially would allow them to only be taxed by their country of residence. But if you still had US sourced income, you would still be subject to US tax. So you don't get off the hook completely so far. But the kind of intention behind this is that most people actually don't end up owing any US tax because a lot of us live in high tax jurisdictions, and we use either the foreign earned income exclusion or the foreign tax credits. And so we're not actually paying any tax to the IRS because we already pay tax in the country that we live in. What is a big driver for people behind this is actually the tax compliance costs. So lots of people are spending hundreds or even thousands of dollars a year just to prove that they owe no tax to the IRS. And so this is potentially an option that may help those individuals so that they're not having to spend so much money on these high tax compliance costs. Now, it wouldn't help everybody. So if, for example, you're like a retiree abroad and you have most of your income from inside of the United States, so most of your income might be Social Security, a 401k, an IRA, something like that, you may not benefit from doing this procedure, but that is why it's an optional procedure. So each individual would have to assess and look at this and determine whether it's something that they would want to do or not. So, but I think the main thing is that it gives people a choice, because at the moment, the only way for somebody to no longer be taxed or subject to having to file with the IRS annually is to renounce one's US citizenship. And people don't want to do that. It's really, really clear. People time and time again come to me and they say, I've done the calculations and I either pay $2,000 a year to prove that I owe no tax to the IRS, or I renounce my US citizenship. And it's really painful. People don't want to do that because it's part of their identity. It's part of who they are.
Sure.
So this would allow them to no longer have to pay $2,000 to an accountant every year, but keep their US citizenship. And I mean, it would also address a number of other things. For example, a lot of people who feel very restricted in terms of being able to invest. It would get them out from the PFIC stuff. I don't know if you want to go into we have a lead on fixing PFICs as well. I'm happy to
Sure.
talk about that. I don't see that changing this year, but that's definitely we have a clear path for reforming the PFIC regime now. That's something that only just developed last month. But like, yeah, a lot of people are like, I can't save in a pension. I can't invest for my future. How do I
Right.
save money for my children? All of that stuff. People feel very restricted because of their US citizenship. And so that is one potential option on the table that could potentially happen this year. Um, that said, there is no guarantee because there's a lot of things that are potentially subject on the table in terms of what might go into this tax bill this year, but nobody really knows exactly what all is going to go in. They just announced this week that they're going to aim to pass the bill by July 4th. However, that deadline has been slipping every few months, so we'll have to see if they can actually deliver by July 4th. But
Are they going to move it to the next holiday? Is that what
yeah, I
they're kind of
mean,
doing?
if you look at the tax bill that the Republicans passed in Trump's first term, there was a big tax bill called the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017. It's really actually common for a new president or a president in their first year of their 4-year term to pass a big tax bill. It's pretty common practice. So it's not unusual that Trump passed one in 2017 of his first year in office. And yet again, it's not unusual that he's looking at passing another one this year. Um, uh, but that said, nobody really knows what's going to go in yet. I know from speaking to my contacts in Washington that um, like everybody is kind of scrambling to try to figure out what will go into the bill. There's a priority in terms of all the different kinds of things that Trump said on the campaign trail last year. So the Republicans are trying to kind of reconcile all of those, but all of it comes at a cost, right? So
Sure.
they're not too keen on spending too much money because they're going to have to find a way to pay for some of those tax cuts if they're going to want to do them. So how they're going to do that, I don't know. No, nobody really knows. I mean, to give them credit, they're trying to figure it out, but I don't think they're going to be able to do it all. I don't think they're going to be able to make all of those promises come true. But we'll have to see, you know. And yeah, so those are the kind of like main items. I mean, the other thing that people who are small business owners were impacted by what's called the uh, guilty tax. I was trying to remember what the acronym stands for. I think it's Global Intangible uh, Income Tax, something like that. I can't remember exactly
Yeah,
what it stands
global
for.
intangible low taxed income. That's really close.
There you
There
go.
you
There you
go.
go. Not a great acronym, to be honest, because none of these people are guilty, as
Right.
it were. We were unintentionally swept up in this change to the corporate tax regime in 2017. And so a lot of small business owners ended up having to close their business because they were getting double taxed.
Mm.
But there are a number of provisions on GILTI that expire at the end of this year, so the door is open on GILTI reform right now. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to have some sort of an exclusion put in place for small business owners abroad. And so that's one of our other priority projects at the moment, is trying to get that fix done. And I can say with confidence that there is interest in Congress to address that. Again, I have no idea if we'll actually be able to get it in, but I am going to be flying to DC in a month, and we're going to be doing congressional meetings with the tax writers, so the people that are actually working on the tax bill. So we're going to be doing our best to try to push for that GILTI exclusion for small and medium business owners abroad, as well as for the residence-based tax bill. So
Mhm.
fingers crossed, we'll have to see.
You guys sound very busy.
Yes, it
Do
is.
you,
It is very busy this year. I think a lot of people don't seem to realize how much work is like. Um, some of the congressional offices called this year the Super Bowl of tax, because they don't pass a tax bill every year. You
Mhm.
know, it does not happen that often. And so when it does happen, it's a really big deal. And normally, what the kind of strategy that they use is, it's very hard to pass one bill in Congress. It has to go through all the committees and
Mhm.
markup and all of that. So what they tend to do is they package lots of bills together into one big tax bill. But when you have something that's much bigger, it moves slower. So
Mhm.
it takes time to put all the puzzle pieces together and to make it fit and work. And also to get all the parties to agree, because not only are you dealing with um, members that are in the Ways and Means Committee in the House, who each have their own individual priorities that they want to get in there, you also have individual members in the Senate who have priorities and they want to get their stuff in there. And then the House and the Senate also have different rules that they're operating under. And somehow you have to marry the House and the Senate together to the extent where they agree on something.
Well, that
Um,
sounds easy. No big
so
deal.
no, I mean, to be honest, I think it's fascinating how they even get a tax bill passed in the first place.
Mm.
It's just there are so many tiny little details that go into it. And as we've seen, a lot of that detail is overlooked and often has to go through what's called a technical change. So often when a big tax bill passes, about a year later, they pass like a technical fix bill, which is smaller, but it kind of addresses and fixes some of the stuff that they didn't really intend, or they didn't have time to completely look through in the bigger tax bill. But we didn't really get that from the 2017 bill. And so, in 2017 was that was 8 years ago at this point. So
Mm.
there's a number of things that like have not been fixed over the last 8 years, or further problems that were caused from 2017, like the guilty tax, that people are looking at getting fixed. So there's a lot going on. I mean, that is an understatement, but hopefully that kind of gives you a flavor of what's going on right now.
Absolutely. And it sounds like it's not, strictly speaking, it's not to do with the election results per se. It's just that this also happens to be like a big ticket year for all the items you just mentioned, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, when we go to Washington, we meet with Democrats and Republicans, and like, because ultimately, at the moment, this particular bill is being worked on by the Republicans. They've decided to not work in a bipartisan way, which is unfortunate. Because if you look at the statistics, any bills that pass on a bipartisan basis tend to have less problems in the long term, because you're balancing both viewpoints. But that's how they've decided to do it. And like who knows what will happen if eventually they're unable to, like, even within the Republican Party get everybody on board to vote for it because they have very slim majorities in both the Senate and the House. So they need to have everybody on board, and even if they have like one small group, then that are going to vote against it, then it won't pass. So, we'll have to see if they can get everybody in the party on board. And then if they can't, then most likely what will happen is they'll turn to the Democrats and they'll do a deal with the Dems in order to pass something, or at the very least pass something that's like a slimmed down version of uh, addressing just the provisions that are expiring that need extending. So that's why it's really important for us to continue to talk to both sides, because you never know which way it's going to flip. And then on top of that, like you don't know which way it's going to flip in the election. And then on top of that, in terms of how it will go in terms of passing a bill in and of itself, as well, as well. So yeah,
I'm
it's
tempted to think of Schoolhouse Rock whenever I hear that particular phrase.
yeah, I
Something
think
close to that.
Schoolhouse Rock is how it used to work.
Okay, it's a bit outdated now.
Not, I mean, that's like textbook, like this is how it's
Sure.
supposed to work. And in an
Mhm.
ideal world, that is how it would work. But um, because there have been so many slim majorities in Congress over the last few Congresses, um, basically it doesn't matter if it was Democrat or Republican, like there have been slim majorities. They've had to kind of work on a different way to pass legislation. So this particular tax bill is being worked on under a process called reconciliation. And essentially, there are some rules which allow you to pass. Normally, with a tax bill, you have to pass through the Senate with 60 votes. So in order for it to pass through the Senate. But under reconciliation, you just need a simple majority, but then you have a bunch of rules on top of it in terms of what you can and can't do if you pass it through reconciliation. So there's a lot of negotiation about what that looks like. And up until, I don't know, I think it was maybe a few decades ago, there weren't that many bills that were passed under reconciliation, because they didn't need to, because they had bigger majorities. But today, in recent times, they've been operating under reconciliation, or passing bills under reconciliation. So it's a way of getting things done, or at least getting something done. Not necessarily everything that should get done,
But getting it over the line, right?
but yeah, basically.
Yeah, gotcha. Um, and so that helps us a lot to understand how things work in Washington. Coming back to the UK stroke London, what kinds of things can folks be doing in somewhere like there to help you guys out?
Yeah, so it's not just the UK or London, it's any American abroad anywhere in the world, really.
Mhm.
So I would say the number one thing that people can really do is vote.
Mhm.
I know this year isn't a big year for elections, but if you're from Virginia or New Jersey, they have some big governor elections there this year in November. So those are definitely worth registering for. So the easiest way to register to vote is to go to votefromabroad.org, and you can register to vote in like 5 minutes, and it's really super easy. Um, and yeah, I think the reason I say that is because when people vote from abroad, they count how many people actually voted by overseas absentee ballot, and all of that data gets collected, so that we know how many people are actually living abroad. Um, we don't actually know how many Americans abroad there are. There's estimates. I know that the State Department estimated there are 9 million Americans living abroad, but that was an
I've heard before
estimate.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was an estimate like 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, and so, like, it really helps to know how many people are impacted by these tax laws. So when we go to Washington, one of the first things that we do when we walk into an office is we say X number of people voted in the most recent election from your district or state. And that helps us in terms of getting the issues prioritized compared to all the other um, like issues that they're being worked on. Because you have to keep in mind that we're one very small part of the uh, different types of groups that Washington and congressional offices meet with. They're being bombarded with lobbyists and advocacy groups and, about all different kinds of issues like gun rights and abortion and, all these other issues. And then we come in, little old me comes in to talk about taxes for Americans abroad. And I'm competing against all of the big name lobbyists in Washington who live there, So it really helps when I'm able to go in and say this is the number of people that are impacted and that then and pretty much every time they say, "Oh, I had no idea there were that many people living abroad." So that's the number one thing that people can do. The second thing that people can do is contact their members of Congress and ask them to vote for a bill or co-sponsor a bill, like the uh, residence-based tax bill. You can ask now, even though the bill hasn't been reintroduced for this Congress yet. You can just call them up and leave a voicemail if it's not a person. And more often than not, it's an intern that answers. So I know a lot of people are really nervous about calling, but it's like a junior intern. I wouldn't worry about it too much, Um, and say, please, can you ask the congressman or woman to vote for this bill when it comes up for a vote, or when it's introduced, and then when the bill is introduced, call them again and say, please, will you ask them to co-sponsor on the bill? Because the more co-sponsors a bill has, the higher chance it has of passing.
Yeah, what I've heard previously, and I maybe I've experienced this myself as well, actually, is that I think people tend to think that they need to have like a full chapter and verse when they pick up the phone and call their congressman or congresswoman. But I suspect the experience doesn't have to necessarily be that exhaustive, right? I think most of the time, even just a couple of sentences about who you are and what you're calling about is more than enough to get your point across. But maybe it also varies from office to office.
No, I mean, we have scripts on our website and instructions on how to call, and it's really easy. You say, I'm so and so, and I live in whatever country, and I'm a constituent. I think that's the main thing, is to emphasize that just because you're living abroad doesn't mean that you're no longer a constituent, which,
Right.
to be honest, I've talked to congressional offices and they didn't even know that you're still considered a constituent. So I've had to educate them on how it works. But it does help to remind them, I'm a constituent and I want you to co-sponsor this bill or vote on
Mhm.
this bill. Um, because I mean, people in the States are doing that left, right, and center all the
Sure.
time.
Mhm.
So we're kind of competing against all of the other issues that people are calling in about. But the more of us that call in, the better, really.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So contacting congressmen, voting, very important. Anything else that you'd recommend if they wanted to get involved, to get engaged and help out?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always looking for more volunteers, more more people to help out with the team. We can never have enough help, really. Um,
Hmm.
it takes lots of people to push water uphill, which is what we're doing basically. But I think everybody plays a role. Everybody can do something to help. So there's a volunteer section on our website. I can find it and put it in the chat box if that
Yeah,
helps.
absolutely.
Um, so that people know where to go in order to express interest on volunteering for
Yeah,
us.
absolutely. We'll make sure that, yeah, Ruben, make sure that gets put in the chat there.
There we
I
go.
think what we'll do now then, oh, perfect, there it is. I think we go ahead and we open it up to the floor to see if there's any questions from our attendees or such. We do have a few that were submitted ahead of time between Ruben and myself, but it depends. Do you want us to go right into sort of rapid fire questions, or what's your comfort level there?
I'm open, whatever. Shoot.
Okay. Okay. Well, one common question, so we got this one. I also hear it quite often. So there are those Americans who were, I guess you could say, like accidentals, if that makes sense, who were born maybe in the States but grew up elsewhere, had American parents, something like that. They're often surprised by the idea that they can vote even if they've never lived in a state before. I don't know if you had any thoughts about, just because you've never lived in the States, does that mean that you can't vote, and or where do you start on figuring out how to vote?
Yeah. So, yeah, the way it works is if you are a US citizen, even if you've never even lived in the US or even touched US soil, if you have US citizenship, you also have the right to vote in US elections. So again, the best place to go in order to figure out how to do that is votefromabroad.org. And there's also a messaging option or an email address on the website where if you have any questions about how to fill out the form or how to figure out where to register, the way it works if you have never lived in the US is you use your US parents' last US address, sorry, in order to register to vote. So that's how it works.
Gotcha. Perfect. So that helps us understand how to get registered to vote. Is that something that you should routinely do every time? Do people have to re-register? I guess that's another question we get a lot, is just people are not familiar with the overall process. Like maybe they move from one country to another and I'm not sure if they need to do it over again, those types of things.
Yeah, so it is good to do it every year. Different states do it in a different way, but we generally recommend that people request their absentee ballot on an annual basis. So I actually have an alarm set up on my calendar that it repeats every January 1st because most people don't do very much on January 1st anyway. So I just take a few minutes on my phone and I go and I register and I get it done for the year. And that way, if there is an election, you never know if there's going to be a special election or what. But that way you're signed up right away and you then get the absentee ballot sent to you as and when the election comes up. Most years there's a primary as well as the general election in November. And I also recommend that people sign up for getting their ballot emailed to them as well, because that way you'll get it emailed to you 45 days in advance. That's required by federal law for all the states. And then you then print it out, and then you, depending on the state, very few let you email your ballot back. I wish I lived in a state, or I was from a state that did that, but I vote in Ohio, and they require a physical ballot to be mailed back by postal mail. So I print mine out and then I send it back by postal mail the next day. And then that way I know it's received in time, because a lot of ballots don't get counted because they're sent back too late. And postal mail is just totally not very reliable. So like it's always worth doing it as soon as possible so that you know that it's arrived and you know that it'll be counted.
Gotcha. And for those of us who don't remember to set the alarms on New Year's, is there just like, rough sort of number of days? Is it about 45 days before the election? Yes, you still have time to get the ballot in. Is that basically the takeaway there?
No, it varies per state, but every January, I forget the exact day, but I think it's January 20th is International Voter Registration Day. So that tends to be January is a really good time to register to vote in general. So if you don't remember by January 1st, if you remember by the end of January, that's fine too.
Gotcha. And is there a way for people to reach you? Is it via the votefromabroad.org website, or if they have any questions or would like to learn more about how to get involved?
I can put my email address but it's Taxation TF, which stands for Taxation Tax Force. I know it's a mouthful, at democratsabroad.org.
Mhm. Yeah, perfect.
That's the best way to get a hold of me.
Right. And then last question from me. Since you've been here in the UK, what's your favorite food that you've encountered over here?
Oh gosh.
Is the list really that long? Let's be honest.
No, I've been here for 18 years, and I have to say that about 10 years ago, there was a real turning point, and the culinary scene here just got infinitesimally better. Um,
Mhm.
Personally, I'm a huge Turkish fan. And like there are pockets of London that have like Turkish communities,
Sure.
and I mean their food is delicious. I mean, you can't have something better sometimes. So yeah, I'm a big I never had it before I moved here, so I'm a big fan.
Okay. So it's helpful to have those different pockets where London has a bit of everything. You'll be able to find any kind of cuisine you want, right? And it is pretty top notch in my experience.
I mean, I'm very fortunate to live in London. We have it's in the US, like you have industries that are spread out, so like you have like music and entertainment in like New York and LA, and like politics in DC, and like business in Chicago or whatever, but in the UK everything's in London, everything.
Mm,
So we get everything right here. So I feel very fortunate that to live here and to be able to experience all the country has to offer. Although I
yeah.
love leaving London too. London can get a little too much sometimes.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm in London by the Sea, as it's kind of jokingly called. I'm next to Brighton, but even here, the Turkish offerings are top notch. And I've lived in Turkey, and to me,
Oh,
it definitely passes muster. So, it's yeah, lots of great choices here for that for sure. And you get the seafront, so and you do get Londoners down here every now and then, but hey, we won't be too harsh towards them. They
yep.
get to enjoy the sea too sometimes. Perfect. Ruben, did we have any other things we wanted to make sure we covered here today?
I think we've pretty much covered it all, but I think if anyone has any other questions that arise, then they can reach out to us at Dunhill Financial with our email address, or alternatively Rebecca's as well, and would be more than happy to help on any questions relating to Democrats aboard, tax fairness, etc. But yeah, I think that essentially covers all of the agenda we have today.
Perfect. Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for taking the time. It's great to hear that you guys are hard at work, and trust me, there's lots of people asking lots of those types of questions right now. So it's very timely that we were able to just have you on and talk through things. And yeah, we really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Wonderful. All right, guys, thanks for joining. Hope you all have a wonderful evening and look forward to catching you again soon.